Let's start this one off with the problem, shall we? Problem number 1 is that I have a failure on one of my prints. And this is not due to the machine, the resin, settings, or maybe it's settings, but actually it's because I used the pre-supported model, and I know I shouldn't have. Now this is not necessarily to have a dog poo-poo on the person who pre-supported this, but realistically pre-supporting stuff is quite a complicated situation. And this is because everybody's machine is different, everybody's settings are different, and essentially this means that everybody's stuff's going to be different. Annoyingly, that also means that whatever works for their printer might be possible, very possible, that they are overexposing their prints to get them out, which means their supports which work for them, it might not work for you. I guess also, depending on how well you have tuned your own machine, essentially. My machines are obviously tuned pretty well. I've got my settings pretty much to exactly where I need them, and my settings print according to my support settings that I use, which means that if I support things myself, usually I have really good success with this because I've already set my settings to work well with the exposure settings that I'm using on my machine. That's a lot of waffle for the beginning of a video. Let's not dwell on this, let's just rectify the situation. Also, I just want to mention that I am using the Sunlu resin because the Sunlu resin is the cheap and the good cheap. So check out link in description if you like Sunlu resin. Thank you. Now to fix this is pretty simple, really. I'm just gonna have to go in and actually support this myself. I had a load of fails with the pre-supports, even on these parts of the body, but now that I've supported it myself, it should be a whole lot better and easy to come off, because like I said, I've set my settings to work really well with my settings on my printer and my pre-supports and the resin that I'm using. This week I want to try something completely different from my usual painting techniques, and I'm gonna try doing this cell shading 2D effect look that I see across on the internet. Now I'm not gonna lie, this is f***ing difficult to do, so if there is no video this week, it's because I just couldn't do it. Oh yes, my name is your dad, and welcome to another packet of spaghetti boiled in a bag of shrimps. So the model I've chosen for this is this Goku from CA3D Studios. They didn't sponsor this video, but I have a good relationship with them, so they gave me the model to use for free. Now, as this is a new project and something I've never done before, I decided not to print in the biggest scale. This is only 1/12 scale, meaning that these things are extremely tiny, also making this thing that I'm trying to attempt to be a little bit more difficult. But I have a saying around here that it's not a saying as much as it is just to paint miniatures. If you're trying something new, try it on a miniature. Like, why are you painting a quarter scale statue to practice skin tones, bruh? You want to use your money like that? So, a smaller model clearly means less material and less paint. This costs you less to try out something which you might not even be able to do in the first place. And some people are gonna say that, oh, painting miniature is not the same as painting models. Oh, I always have this story, and I really don't care about it. Because at the end of the day, paint is paint and a model is a model. It doesn't really matter whether it's bigger or smaller. Some of you seem to think that you put less effort into a miniature. You're wrong. You couldn't be any more wrong. But let's not worry about that. And let's just try to figure out how to paint this cell shading vibes. Obviously, my first step is going to be putting the model together at least to a level which I can paint things in separate colors. So for example, the legs can go together, and I can probably glue some of the stuff together. I'm going to try to put some magnets in it to make it easier to put it together as well, but that might not even happen either. This is all an experiment. Goku, please don't fail me. Step 1 of trying to do this weird thing that I'm trying to do is no different from any other steps that I would usually do making a model. So I'm going to glue the parts together that I need glued together, which I'm going to use super glue to do this method, which is just gluing things. I'm also going to use one of those drill to make some holes a little bit bigger so that I can fit some magnets in to be able to stick this Goku together with the power of the magnets. Like that. after spending a few hours putting it all together, I'm going to take it all apart again so that I can start painting it. I'm going to use these little crocodile clamp things that I found on Amazon attached to a tiny piece of threaded bar, whatever the heck this thing is. It's just a stick with a clamp on the end, and I'm going to hold them and I'm going to spray them all. This time the primer layers are going to be Wraithbone from Citadel, and it is a terrible color to use in general, but for this model particularly I needed to start from a very light base because all the colors I'm going to put over need to be a solid saturated version of themselves. And what I'm going to now do, as you can see in the pictures that I am showing you on the screen, is just paint a solid color for every single part of the body and model that needs to be that color. For example, his pants and his jacket is going to be painted in orange. This is just a flat orange, and in the color scheme of things I'm going to be using the medium or middle color of the three colors that I'm going to be using to create the effects that I'm going to create, and I'm going to have to explain all of that to you in a different way. Now that the base tones are on, it's pretty easy for me to figure out my colors that I'm going to use. And by easy, what I mean is, I don't really know what I'm doing. Again, I have no idea what is going on here. So I'm literally just going to grab a couple of dark, light, and medium colors of each of the colors that are pretty much part of this model, and hope for the best, because it's now time to start layering up some colors. Now the thing about Ball Z Dragons is that they have the cell shading stuff on them, so I'm going to need to try and replicate that somehow. I don't think I can actually do this perfectly, but I think I can do something similar to this that can make this model appear like it is a animation in the little video. At least that's what I hope, and hopefully it doesn't look terrible. In my mind, the way that I would approach this is exactly how I am doing it right now. And what I decided to do was to paint the main color down because I can come back in and paint the shadows. As you can see, the shadows in the models on the TV, which are not actually models, they're just animations. It's 2D and this is 3D. So the confusing part about all of this is that when you think you've got it right on one side and you turn it around, it looks dumb on the other. So I don't really know how to tell you the best way to approach this, but what I did was paint the shadows where I thought the shadows would have been anyway, except for they would have been blended out a little bit better using my airbrush. And I'm just going to make sure that I use the darkest color in the darkest areas and the brightest color in the brightest areas. I don't really know how else to say this in words. I think really the best way to explain it is to think of every single little part of the model as an individual shape on its own. Essentially, if you have a triangle, then you need to shade that triangle. If you have a square, you shade the square. And knowing what shape to shade the square or triangle, that is another thing all on its own. I cannot give you that information because that is learned information, and I'm going to be totally honest, I don't even know that information myself, because as I'm doing this, I realize just how bad of an artist I actually am. I can produce some really amazing artwork sometimes, but in general, I actually have really bad fundamentals, and this is something that shows really strong when it comes to painting something like this, because you need to know how shadows and highlights work when they hit an object. Obviously, this is something that the brain takes note of throughout your life's experience. So practicing these things is how you get better at them, which is why I suggest painting miniature things over large things. This video has been a little bit deep, and I know that it sounds a little bit crazy to hear a person like me speak very deep like this, but it is the honest truth, and the only way you can overcome any kind of a problem like this is to just get over the fact that practicing is what is going to make you better at doing the thing. Annoyingly, all of the knowledge that I have and put into doing something like this has come from years of experience, and even still I think that what I've produced is not actually adequate enough. But what I have done is proven to myself that the style is possible for me to at least replicate, and on a larger scale I think I would have an easier time doing it. But because I chose to make it in a smaller scale, which brings me around to the fact that I always suggest using miniatures to learn something, is because it costs you a lot less. Yes, it might not look as good, and sure, your lines aren't going to be as crisp, but If you practice painting them on this size of a thing, imagine how easy it's going to be when you get it right this small and you move on to the bigger one. It's going to be so much easier because you've now learned brush control on something small, and the big one is actually bigger, meaning that you don't have to have as much brush control, but you've already practiced for the worst case scenario. Speaking of brush control, I had to paint every single line of black into this model. That is because these things, when they're drawn in 2D, have an outline around them. Annoyingly, I don't really know what to do about the silhouette of that black line. I wish I could add a black line around the whole outside, but that terrifies me because as soon as you turn, it will no longer have that black line. The base was a lot easier though, because the base has sharp objects on it. On the model, there is rounder edges, and I don't really know how the heck I'm supposed to edge highlight that. But for the base, I literally just edge highlighted the living daylights out of this thing with black. It felt terribly weird at first, but the more I did it, the better it seemed to look. I also used some super glue to glue the little pieces of magical stuff that is going around Goku. I don't know actually what it is because I was not allowed to watch that show as a kid. I was busy watching other things. But getting on to other things, there is some smoke on the base, and I used the same techniques for that, painting in the shadows and then giving it a black line. Doing exactly the same thing for the last arm that was left. I painted in some of the shadows, some highlights, and then I gave them a black line. Once I'd given them a black line and it looked kind of okay, I pretty much called this model done. 3D printer humming, what a sight, bringing anime to life, not just in flight. Brushing hand detailing every line, Goku's muscle flashing, looking just fine. Color splash, bright blue, fiery gold, from Dragon Ball to our home it's bold. Brushing hand detailing every line, Goku's muscle flashing, looking just fine. I wish this video could have just been the magic sauce that got you into being able to do something completely different, something new, test your skills, or find out that you're just really bad at something. Either way, I hope that this video was at least somewhat useful, even though I did ramble a little bit in this video, but that's nothing new to this channel. I would like to say a very special thank you to my patrons for supporting me, because without them, I could not do this. Honestly, they are the ones keeping this going, and I just really need to say a massive thank you to them for helping me keeping this going. Also, we're at the part of the video where I get to tell you the best thing in the video, and that's pretty much, if you don't like what you saw, I don't really give a you can now kindly see the door.